Welcome to the CBDC video series, a way for regulators, researchers, and international organizations to learn more about stablecoin technology, design, and policy considerations.
Okay, and we are live. Welcome to the next session about stablecoins. This session is on Celo's stability protocol. Thanks for listening in. I hope you also enjoyed this session. As last time, this is a part of 3 talks. The first talk, the last video basically was an overview on different stability mechanisms. We will recap this overview today. This talk today is about Celo's stability mechanism, and then we will have another session on research and how you could actually look at different risk factors of stability protocols of different stablecoins, and this will be the next video. The agenda for today is there are 3 items on the agenda. Again, as I said, we'll briefly recap the last talk on stability mechanisms, and then talk specifically about Celo stability mechanism. And here, and we introduced this notion already, a lot is about supply and demand, which is important for that. And then we will have an outlook on research on the risk of these different stability mechanisms. And as we said last time, there's no established classification or definition of the term stablecoin. But in the end, many of these coins may not actually be stable. They may have different risks. But one definition is that these stable coins typically track the value of some underlying. And what we look at today is the stability mechanism of Celo dollar. And this is tracking, as the name suggests, the value of the US dollar. Let's jump right into the introduction and the brief recap on stability mechanism. And last time, when we talked about stability mechanism, we introduced 4 different types of stablecoins. One was a fiat or commodity collateralized stablecoin, where the collateral is directly held in fiat or commodities. Examples were Tether or USDC. The governance, of course, is more centralized, is more regulated, and the transparency is a bit different to purely crypto stablecoins, since there's always a counterparty that has to hold this collateral in custody. This counterparty could be a central entity like a bank or a custodian that stores this collateral, and therefore risks are, of course, also counterparty risk, liquidity risks, demand risks. A second type of stablecoins we talked about were crypto collateralized stablecoins. These typically have the collateral on chain. We talked about an example, USDC here, and this is more transparent, as every user can basically have a look at code, can also have a look at the blockchain itself, look at the collateral if it's actually there, as the collateral is crypto, and the stability mainly depends on the crypto collateral itself and on the demand for the stablecoin. The third type of stablecoin we talked about were the seigniorage share type of stablecoins, where there is a seigniorage coin that takes up the volatility of the stablecoin. And here you have also, similar to the crypto collateralized stablecoins, a decentralized governance, since everything is happening on chain. Therefore, every user can have a look at the code base, can have a look at the blockchain, can have a look what collateral is there, and in this case can also have a look how this seigniorage share type of coin is the smart contracts that are basically in work here, how they work. And here the risk, of course, is, or the stability, of course, depends mainly on this seigniorage asset. And of course, again, another risk factor is also the demand for this stablecoin. How you can do research and evaluate these different risk factors will be the topic of the next talk on the research side. Basically, what we want to talk about today is this last type of stablecoin on this overview here, which is a programmatic stablecoin that can be a hybrid between a crypto collateralized stablecoin and a seigniorage style stablecoin, where there is a seigniorage style protocol which is programmatic with a crypto reserve that is held on chain, and therefore also this type of stablecoin is with a decentralized form of governance and comes with high transparency, since everything is happening on chain and every user can have a look at the code base, and every user can basically take part, since in the case of Celo, this is an open source project, and therefore everyone can have a look. And exactly this type of stablecoin we want to dig a bit deeper into today's today's session, and explore how for this type of stablecoin supply and demand works, since in the end, to keep or to track the value of an underlying, you want to match the demand and with a certain supply, and when demand and supply match, then there's a price, and when basically the supply of the stablecoin is flexible and can be adjusted by the protocol, then this price can be stable and can track the value of an underlying. In the case of Celo, we're talking today about the Celo dollar. This is a stablecoin that tracks the value of the US dollar. There is the possibility to have different currencies on the Celo blockchain. So there can be in future a Celo peso or Celo euro or other currencies. However, this is a governance decision. As you know already, this governance is basically decentralized. So it's basically up to the community if there will be other currencies. And today, as an example for all these different currencies, we talk about the Celo dollar. So when talking about Celo stability mechanism, I want to talk about these three different things. I want to talk about supply and demand. I want to talk about CP-DOTO, as in the mechanism that expands or contracts supply of Celo stablecoin. And I want to talk about the reserve. As you already heard, here we have a hybrid between a programmatic stablecoin that programmatically expands and contracts the supply, and additionally has a crypto-only reserve. Let's jump right into, and this is a slide that is already known from last talk about stablecoins. The big uncertain number, or the big uncertain quantity for all stablecoins in the end is the demand. As we talked about last time, you don't actually know what the demand for stablecoin is tomorrow or in an hour or in 1 week. And therefore, to be able to programmatically match supply and demand, you don't want to forecast it. If you want to forecast it, this forecast has to be relatively accurate, so that you can always match the current that supply and demand always match. However, and this is also a chart you already know, it is pretty crucial that supply and demand match. If not, then the stablecoin in this case wouldn't be stable. There would be a price adjustment. If there's, for example, more supply than demand, then it would be basically yield a lower price. And if there's more demand than supply, then the price of the stablecoin could rise. And therefore, you actually want to match supply and demand. And as I said, demand is random. When we have a look again at supply and demand, here you can see at the price of $1, supply and demand actually match. There is demand for 20 million stablecoin, and there's also a supply of 20 million stablecoin. And therefore, they actually match at a price of $1. Now, it could be that there's only 19 million of supply of stablecoin, and therefore, since there's less supply than demand, it could be that the price actually would be higher. And how much it would be higher, this depends basically on this demand function, the blue line you can see in this chart. And the steeper the demand function, the higher the DPEG, basically, if there's, for example, less supply than current demand in market. And therefore, with a programmatic stablecoin like Celo, you have a protocol that always adjusts the current supply to the current level of demand. And since demand is random, you need basically a way to always expand and contract the supply of your stablecoin to current levels. And as today's topic is how this works on Celo, here you can actually see how this works on Celo. So in short, and for some this may be a repetition, but in short, the Celo protocol has two assets. One is the stablecoin we are talking about, the Celo dollar, and this is an elastic supply stable value asset. So there can be more or less Celo dollar out there. The supply of stablecoin here can basically be adjusted. And there's Celo gold, which is a fixed supply variable value asset, the seigniorage coin that should take up the volatility of the Celo dollar. Celo Gold in the Celo platform is the utility token of the protocol. It has multiple purposes. It is a central component to the consensus on the Celo blockchain. Also very central for the governance mechanism, as it allows you to take part in governance and also decide about future currencies on the Celo blockchain. And it is basically, you can lock Celo Gold for voting. But, and this is important for today's topic, Celo Gold is elementary to the stability mechanism. It is held in a reserve smart contract and can always be exchanged for Celo dollars to balance demand excess or demand shortage. So in short, there's always the opportunity for users to exchange one Celo dollar for $1 worth of Celo Gold. And therefore, basically, this Celo Gold part can take up the volatility or in demand for Celo dollars. So basically, to balance Celo dollar demand, excess or shortage, if there's more demand or less demand than current supply, the protocol sets incentives for users to adjust the Celo dollar supply so that it matches the demand at a price target. And this price target is basically the price of the underlying, in this case of the Celo dollar, the price of $1. So a Celo expansion and contraction mechanism allows, as I said, to create new Celo dollars by sending $1 worth of Celo Gold to the reserve, or to burn Celo dollars by redeeming them for $1 worth of Celo Gold again. So this mechanism we here refer to as the decentralized one-to-one mechanism. And basically this mechanism resembles a bit how fiat-backed stablecoins work, because there you can always, if the collateral is actually in place in terms of fiat-backed stablecoins, you can always exchange for collateral. Here you have everything on chain, and therefore it allows you to always exchange for basically reserve currency. And therefore, when we now talk about Doto, this means this decentralized one-to-one mechanism. It is fully decentralized, as everybody can take part in this mechanism. Everyone can exchange Celo dollar for $1 worth of Celo Gold. Let's have a look how this works in a bit more detail. So here, what you can see on the slide, this is a contraction cycle. A contraction cycle means that users can create new Celo dollars by sending $1 worth of Celo Gold to a decentralized exchange. Users can also burn Celo dollars by redeeming them for $1 worth of Celo Gold. And here, when you have a look at this contraction cycle on the right, this is an example of a possible arbitrage that incentivizes users to contract the amount of outstanding Celo dollar. Here, as you can see on the chart, the price of Celo gold is just a random number we have chosen for this presentation. Here in this example, the price of Celo gold is $5, and the price of Celo dollars has fallen to 95 cents at some centralized exchange. So there are different exchanges out there, and users can buy and sell Celo dollars on these exchanges in the future. And if there is an exchange where a user can basically buy a Celo dollar for 95 cents, you can basically, make exactly that trade. You can buy the Celo dollar for 95 cents and trade it on chain for 0.2 Celo gold. This is the equivalent amount of $1, and then sell this 0.2 Celo gold on an exchange for $1, and then you have a 5-cent profit. And by this arbitrage cycle, every user is incentivized to take part in this trade. And here you can also see that this inspiration for this contraction cycle is actually from fiat collateralized stablecoins, because here the arbitrage cycle with a fiat-backed stablecoin is also very fast and direct. You can see if the collateral is actually in place and you can buy it cheaper than $1 on an exchange, you can buy it and get your dollar back. In this case here, you have this on-chain seigniorage coin, the Celo gold, that allows you to exchange a Celo dollar for Celo gold. The same holds true when the price of Celo dollar rises above the peg. So again, we look at the Celo dollar, which is tracking the value of the US dollar. And in this example, what you can see on this slide, the price is at a centralized exchange. The price of Celo dollar is higher than $1. What users can actually now do is they can take $1 and buy 0.2 Celo gold on an exchange, and then trade it on chain for $1 Celo dollar and sell that Celo dollar for $1.05, and again pocket a 5-cent profit. So yeah, since here the price again is higher on the exchange, users can basically engage in that trade. And having like this mechanism fully decentralized and having many users to engage in that trade allows you to constantly set incentives so that users basically expand and contract the amount of Celo dollars in the market. You may have noticed that basically this system needs an on-chain oracle price of Celo gold in US dollars. You need to know what is the value of Celo gold in US dollars. Therefore, you need an oracle, and always when you need an oracle, you could imagine an attack on that oracle, or have a malicious actor that is able to control the oracle and set this on-chain price to a malicious or wrong value. And therefore, this DOTO mechanism, this decentralized one-to-one mechanism, would be willing to exchange massive amounts of Celo gold for the wrong amount of Celo dollars, basically. And therefore, this mechanism has this CP part to it, the constant product part to it, which mitigates this depletion potential of the DOTO mechanism. And this constant product part is basically inspired by Uniswap. Many know Uniswap as an on-chain, fully decentralized market-making mechanism that is working with like certain tank sizes and keeping basically these virtual tanks always in a certain relation to each other, and therefore basically having an on-chain and fully decentralized mechanism that adjusts basically the on-chain price depending on a demand. This mechanism, this constant product mechanism, is a defense mechanism against any faulty oracle value on chain. It only exposes a fraction of the reserve to exchanges at any given moment. And it does this basically via this constant product market making mechanism that is inspired by Uniswap, which will always provide negative feedback in the event that there's a disproportionately high volume of exchange activity on one or the other side. And then there's basically, for this expansions and contractions, there is a reserve in place. And this reserve basically holds Celo gold. The most important information about this reserve is a crypto-based reserve only. So everything that is happening with the reserve is basically happening on chain, and therefore every user can have a look if basically the reserve is actually in place, if there is really Celo gold in place for making these expansions and contractions. However, to have some initial value in this reserve also holds a diversified basket of non-Celo crypto assets to not only have Celo assets backing up Celo assets. And this reserve is rebalanced periodically, and it's used to stabilize basically the stablecoin, the Celo dollar. There are different ways how this reserve can be bolstered. I named some ways how this reserve can actually be bolstered. And to bolster the reserve, the expansion and contraction mechanism I talked about also contains a spread, which is a small fee that is paid for every transaction with that mechanism and actually bolsters the reserve. This reserve also has like some initial over collateralization. When the reserve ratio, this over collateralization, is below a certain threshold, a fraction of all block rewards, which are called epoch rewards, is distributed to the reserve. So in times of a low reserve ratio, a variable transfer fee on Celo gold transaction can also help to bolster this reserve. And all these fees that are in place to bolster the reserve are actually governable parameters, and therefore also the fees to help bolster that reserve are decentralized and governable. I want to talk a bit about what is basically the next step when thinking about stability with a mechanism that works like this. Having a mechanism that works like this, of course, similar to all other mechanisms, involves similar to all fully decentralized other mechanisms, involves some crypto assets. And therefore, what you want to do is basically you want to think about the risk factors that basically underpin or affect this system. And when thinking about these risk factors, you have different ways of thinking about. However, before I talk briefly about that, I just want to mention the nice thing with the mechanism like this is that you can basically add any asset to the reserve. And of course, these assets should always be highly liquid. They should be basically only fully on-chain assets so that everyone can verify that the assets are in place. But the nice thing here is that it allows you to have, if there are tokenized versions of any other asset class out there, to have these added to the reserve. And these could be any asset that can be tokenized. It could be tokenized forest. It could be a on-chain central bank issued bond that is added to the reserve, and therefore having a central bank issuing a promise on a blockchain. This also can be added to the reserve. So basically anything that can be issued and tokenized and can be added to this reserve. When thinking about and analyzing these types of stablecoins, not only this type, but also purely crypto-backed stablecoins or others, you could basically think about doing some sort of either forecasting of, for example, future demand or future value of the reserve assets. And you could do this by just forecasting or guessing tomorrow's value of demand or the reserve assets. You could also do some form of scenario analysis. You could do this basically empirical. You could do it theoretical. If you do it empirical, you could use data that is historic data. However, in the blockchain space, the history of data is relatively short. So therefore, you could also think about simulated data. And then when you want to simulate data, you could think about different processes, stochastic processes, for example, that help you to simulate this data. So you could have a scenario generator that uses different kinds of stochastic processes. And then you could also, like when using these processes to simulate data, you could think about what is the right distribution or distributional assumption to simulate this data. Would like this be normal distributed data, or in the blockchain world rather be maybe heavy-tailed data that has like huge outliers? And thinking about all these like different ways of analyzing programmatic stablecoins is basically the content of the next part of this series on stablecoins, of these like 3 talks about stablecoins. And therefore there you can learn a bit more about how you could basically think about analyzing the risk of these different types of stablecoins. I wanted to leave some time for questions in today's talk. Of course, you can always ask me or us anything about stablecoins in general, the Celo stability mechanism, or analyzing stablecoins. You can see here on the slide how you can reach us. You can use basically the Celo chat. You can use Twitter, and you can also shoot me an email. But I already received some questions, and if you have a look in the Ask a Question field, the first question I got is, in the last talk, you have mentioned Basecoin as another example for an algorithmic stablecoin. And what is the major economic difference to the Basecoin mechanism? This is an excellent question, because Basecoin also had Basecoin, or the Basis protocol, is a project that is already or is not live anymore. They basically stopped developing this protocol. It was also a fully decentralized way of building a stablecoin. And Basecoin had this very nice idea about this, what we also talked about today, matching supply and demand for stablecoin. And they also had expansions and contractions in supply of stablecoin to always match demand. However, what they did was a different type of expansions and contractions. And here I would say this is the major economic difference, how these expansions and contractions worked. With Basecoin, they had auctions, basically, where if the supply of stablecoin, of Basecoin, had to be expanded, they planned to auction off additional Basecoins. And in times of where they needed to contract the supply of Basecoin, they wanted to basically buy them back via a bond token or bond contract. The big problem is what you've seen on this slide about supply and demand. You would need to make an assumption about the demand curve, how steep it is, basically how demand reacts to additional supply or to less supply of Basecoin. And therefore, this assumption is pretty hard. You basically have to make an assumption how much, for example, the price changes if you issue more stablecoin, or how much the price changes if you buy back stablecoin. With Celo and the Celo stability mechanism, you have this constant opportunity to trade with basically the stability mechanism. You can always engage, and everyone can always engage with CP Doto. Everyone can always basically trade a Celo dollar for $1 worth of Celo gold. And I think here's I would say from an economic perspective, one of the major differences between this stability mechanism and Celos. So I hope that answered this question. Second question I got is, what role do Celo Gold and Celo Dollar play in proof of stake governance? So when I talked today about Celo Gold, I was focusing in this crowdcast on the role of Celo Gold in the stability mechanism, and how Celo Gold helps with expanding and contracting the supply of Celo Dollar. However, Celo Gold, and I mentioned this in the beginning, also has another role. And in addition to playing a role in the stability protocol, Celo Gold also plays a role in basically aligning incentives of stakeholders through a proof of stake consensus. So Celo is a proof of stake protocol, and Celo Gold plays a role in that and the governance model. So basically, this governance model resembles a representative democracy, and in this democracy, validators are elected to maintain the network, to earn Celo dollars for maintaining the network, and every stakeholder can basically vote for the validators that are doing that. Therefore, Celo Gold holders can basically vote for validator groups that are composed of individual validators, which are essentially nodes or machines on the network that are basically working on the health of the Celo network. And basically, Celo Gold, as it is a proof of stake blockchain, Celo Gold is your stake, and Celo Gold allows you to take part in governance, and it also allows you to take part in the consensus mechanism by voting for validators. It also allows you to take part in governance decision on which currency to issue next, for example, or in the decision on how should the fees be set, the stability fees in the Celo stability mechanism. And then validators get rewarded by or in Celo dollars once per epoch. An epoch is roughly a day, and therefore basically also Celo dollars play a part in the governance mechanism. And then one more question I received, and this question is, how transparent is the stability mechanism? And I think this is key for many stable coins. How transparent are they? Is there any like code I basically I can have a look at? Is it like a decentralized governance mechanism? And with like this programmatic stability mechanism that is a hybrid between a seniority share mechanism and a crypto collateralized stability mechanism, you have this big advantage of being fully transparent. So everyone can look at the open source code of the Celo blockchain. Everyone can have a look on chain what collateral is in place. And also in future, as Celo is open source, there will be like hopefully community developed tools to have a very easy look. There will be basically community developed websites that show you the state of the reserve. So I think this is one of the big advantages of this type of stablecoins. They are very transparent. So those are the questions I received. I hope this was interesting. Thank you very much for listening in, and looking forward to any other questions. Thank you.